Hey everybody, my name is REDRUP and you're listening to the It's Not a Phase podcast. On this episode, I'm joined by Void of Vision vocalist Jack Bergin to talk about the band's new EP, Chronicles 2 Heaven. We also cover what the Chronicles EP series is all about, exploring their EDM influences, working and collaborating with other artists, his side project Cherry, and loads more. Before we get started, let's cover off the boring stuff. If you enjoy this episode and would like to support the podcast, please consider subscribing, rating, and leaving a review wherever you're listening to this. We also have a Patreon, where everyone gets access to each episode a week earlier than everyone else, a Discord community, and a merch store too. You can also follow and reach out to me on social media. All of the links can be found at itsnotaphase.co.uk. That's itsnotaphase.co.uk. And with all of that out of the way, let's jump right into this week's episode of It's Not a Phase. What's up everyone? Thanks for joining me on this episode of It's Not a Phase, where I'm joined by Jack Bergin, vocalist for Void of Vision. How are you doing, man?
Doing very well. Thank you for having me, mate.
So you've just released a new EP, Chronicles 2 Heaven, the second part of your Chronicles EP series.
Yes.
Where does that kind of pick up from last year's Lust, and how do the two EPs kind of connect to one another?
I think it picks up kind of taking a bit of a different route for the first, I guess, initial listen. It's a very different concept in terms of just us flexing different kinds of, areas that we have explored before, but I guess not as successfully. Successfully is the best word, I guess, to say, because, I feel like we have explored this territory, but we hadn't quite mastered it yet in previous releases. So it's nice to revisit it after sitting on some stuff for so long through COVID and really mastering our craft and getting everything nice and, nice and executed well with like the right influence and the right, mentoring, if you will, like getting people like Dan from Architects in the Fold to help like sort of reorganize our sound, if you will. And I guess it takes off there in a sort of a different route, but it also ties back in the same sense that it is thematically in the same universe of, I guess, the theme of finding oneself throughout this EP series. And finding yourselves and who are you in this mess of a world that we've been experiencing the past few years, and I guess where you're going to take yourself in the future. So there's a lot of self-discovery elements in this series, and this is kind of just continuing on with that.
So I take it that's kind of like stuff that, you've said like self-discovery. This is stuff that's come up with you over, the lockdown period. Because like the first track on the first EP, it's kind of like a statement, isn't it? This did Void of Vision.
Yeah.
The Chronicles begins. So it's quite like an opening statement to the whole series, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think like literally the idea with that began as we've never had like a introduction track for live, and we thought like, all right, if we're reintroducing this band after COVID, let's just kick it all off like how we would have ever wanted it beginning this band. And I think the first thing in our brains was just big, like lay it all out intro for everyone live. And we ended up with that. And I think just, to start it with a big, powerful statement was definitely captured. Yeah.
Go hard or go home, right?
That's it. Yeah.
So, you say that's quite like a bold statement. Would you say that, this is the kind of Void of Vision that you've kind of been striving to become over, your time as a band?
Absolutely. I think we wouldn't have landed here if we didn't, of course, go through the years beforehand of just, I guess, attempting things and not failing, but I guess not hitting the mark that we initially wanted to. And I think that's what makes this so special, because we have been going for quite a bit now, and to finally like have gone through so much trial and error to land where we have is truly special, because it just feels a lot more right now, being a lot more mature than we originally were starting this band. It's all ideas that can be executed by us. It's not sort of just throwing stuff up in the air and hoping it'll land. It's kind of, we know what's going to work for us, and we've got a much better sensibility about us now and how to execute, I guess, bold ideas as successfully as we can. And I think that's part of why it's doing so well at the moment, and I'm very excited to keep continuing in this trend, because it's making us enjoy creating music so much more. And I think that reflection period over COVID just did absolute wonders for us, to be honest.
Because I think that's kind of obviously COVID as a whole was, it's terrible, right? It's
of course.
But in terms of like for creatives, there's people that kind of got stuck and couldn't really think of what to do, whereas other people like yourself, you took that time to kind of hunker down and think like, we've got downtime now. Let's plan out like what we want to do, what's going to happen when things boot back up again.
Absolutely, man. Like, I mean, we had our whole lives spread out on a table, really. Like, there was not a whole lot to do, especially down here in Melbourne. I think we were facing some pretty hectic, like, lockdown extensions that I don't know if anywhere else in the country saw, but we were kind of just stuck with our thoughts for way too long. And I think that's definitely resulted in where we've come out of this period. Because, it's been crazy just having that much time up our sleeves to plan out everything. And, it's just been nice, I guess, to reap the rewards of such a awful time frame, like you said, because I mean, something had to come out of the end of it, something good. And I think we've sort of met with that adversity that everyone has had to face. Of course, we're not obviously alone in this, but like, I think it's nice to know that we used it in a way that we could help ourselves and sort of grow, and instead of sort of regressing and facing a bit less of a more positive end after it's all wrapped up.
Yeah, trying to make the best of a bad situation, really.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So when did this Chronicles, the planning and the ideas of this Chronicles series begin? Was this something you were kind of tinkering with pre-COVID, or was it something that literally came from, being in lockdown and thinking about it?
I think the EP series was always, as soon as the pandemic hit, I think before then we'd begun writing a record, and right. I think a lot of the influences, obviously you've heard these two EPs and they're quite different in styles, like the two of them put together. And I think we began realizing the early stages of that, and we really wanted to keep experimenting with these different sounds, not necessarily as one release, but almost as like more of a single layout, and I guess to keep up with like the modern day kind of release campaign trends. Like you see a lot of single releases and stuff. But we knew that if we did an album, we wouldn't be able to necessarily tour it in full off the back of a pandemic. We might still be like faced with a lot of restrictions forcing us to not be able to do that, and that would be a worst nightmare. We saw a lot of friends go through the same thing, and I think, like, for example, like Polaris now are only getting to tour off the record they released at the start of the pandemic. And it's just so gut-wrenching to see. I mean, it's awesome that it's getting met with such positive reception still 2 years on. But like, I think for some artists like us, I don't think we'd be able to hack that. But the EP idea kind of came from that pandemic stage. We kind of wanted to put out music still, but we didn't want to be hunkered down into releasing a huge body of work that we've poured everything into. So I thought that perhaps if we slowly paced everything out, then we could perhaps be met with a bit more of a friendly kind of, I guess, resurgence back into normality. Not that we're essentially back to normal yet, but we're so close. And I think it's funny that the stronger, I guess, these EPs are beginning to get for us, it's kind of meeting with the return of times and touring and everything, and it's pretty much working in our favor with how we planned. So it's been doing so far so good. yeah, definitely. And I think you talked about like current day. You kind of have to keep pushing material quite regularly, and you've got the EPs, and I think nowadays with singles and EPs, they get more. Most of the time they get more of like a spotlight than if you put out a full body of work. I think it's a lot of that is like people like to like compartmentalize things. Like all of the with these EPs, each of the songs gets more of a time to shine, whereas if someone just looks at an album like 12 13 songs, they're less inclined to listen to that than if they look at an EP like, oh, it's 4 or 5 songs, I can listen to that on my run or something like that. That's it, man. It's a bit crazy to think of, isn't it? Like, I think just releases are going to look so different on the outside of COVID from now on. I think there's going to be a lot more things like this happening. I think it's like part of attention span of the future as well. Like, look at this TikTok culture. Like, people won't last 30 seconds on like watching a video if it's not just grabbing them from the start anymore. So I think I don't know. There's definitely something in these shorter release spans, which sucks because, like, obviously we've grown up with albums and we've grown up with movies and just all these lengthy pieces and meaty pieces of work that you can really sink your teeth into. And I don't quite know if they translate as well anymore. Part of the fun trying to translate that into these shorter pieces of work, so it's still a really immersive experience and not exactly just a kind of candy-coated little piece of media that you can just flick up on your phone in 30 seconds and watch. So it's part of the challenge, but it's it's still very fun nonetheless.
Yeah. Like you say, you get the full length experience. You've got like, you can get like, concept bands. Like if you listen to like Coheed and Cambria, they've got this huge elaborate story. Whereas I think what guys like you are doing with this Chronicles series, instead of one whole body of the concept, you're kind of like threading a concept through little stages, like, like a weekly series on Netflix, something like that. You thread everything together as opposed to here it all is.
That's it. Yeah. I think it kind of gives people, that's a very good way to put it. It gives people something to look forward to, much like, I guess, a Netflix series sort of pacing itself out, like episode a week at a time. And yeah, there's just something about that kind of just hooks people back in. I'm not too sure. It's just, especially if you're like you're very good at capturing the audience like that and sort of like sucking them in. It really works well in your favor. And I think, I don't know, a lot of the thematic elements like that I've chose to incorporate in this have sort of like served as kind of a bit of an eye-catching element, like the way that we're dressing and the way that we're presenting these EPs visually is definitely a way that I wanted to sort of put out there to kind of catch people's attention from the get-go. And I think that's helped so much, like in terms of getting people on board with this series so far.
So what's kind of the plan with the Chronicles series? Is there going to be a part 3, a part 4? Like how long, at least for now, are you intending to take it?
We have capped it at a number. I'll give you that.
Okay, it's not going to be like Chronicles 10.
We were originally thinking like full Star Wars mode and like going all the way up. But I mean, at the end of the day, Chronicles has been such an enjoyable experience, this way of writing, like I guess on the fly, because it's kind of like we will finish a release and then we'll head straight into the next one and it'll just be like fresh influence, fresh motivation, and it's just worked so well in our favor. So I can definitely see this way of writing something that we will return to in the future, but we have capped it at a certain number for the time being, because obviously there will be a body of work in the future coming out that we'd love to do again. I really think that the Chronicles could return again, like in the not too certain future after this has been capped off. But yeah, as for then, I guess it'll just be knuckling down into the next body of work after whatever Chronicles come next.
Yeah. So where are we looking at? And, you're saying like, you're doing it bit by bit. So it's not like you've recorded what the whole Chronicles series is. You're just kind of like doing it after one another. That's how it's going? Yeah,
that's exactly right. So for example, like we've just released EP2 and we're heading into the studio next week to track EP3. So like it's just very quick business. And I think we started writing this one pretty much as soon as we finished the last one's recording process too. So it's kind of just, it's been go. And it's just been, it's been really nice to do this because we haven't had such ongoing motivation and I guess each other pushing each other for so long. And I think it is like starting to get a bit busier now because as soon as we've finished tracking this EP, I think touring kind of hits back for us. Like we pretty much head on our Oz run, head over to the States, and then we've got a bunch more international stuff to come. So it's going to be tricky. Obviously, this is definitely a different form of writing that was definitely much more suited to a lockdown environment. But that's the thing. I think there's definitely like a fresh way of writing and a fresh way of approaching things that we really loved exploring. And if there's other ways for us to like look for in the future of different ways of creating things, like if we wanted to bloody go down the path of writing movie soundtracks or something, like then there's something there for us too. It's just the challenges and the exciting sort of possibility that kind of encourage us to keep moving in a different direction.
So would you say that the way that you're putting these EPs out and writing them kind of like one after the other, does the previous, obviously so far, as the previous EP and what has landed with fans, what hasn't, kind of informed where you go next, or have you already kind of like got a vision in mind?
Well, that's it. That was another big positive of this series. I think we were originally really intending for this as a bit of a test drive too, because obviously we can see what kicks with people. Obviously all the diehard VOV fans loved EP1 because it was just balls to the wall, super heavy stuff. And this second one just showed a side that we've never really showcased before, and it sort of won over a whole lot of new fans. And I think it also kept a lot of those old ones too, which has been super interesting. So now we're kind of faced with I guess seeing a lot more success with this second one. So at the moment, I guess you could say the future is kind of leaning towards that. But I think what's in store for the next one, at least, is yet again another departure from these two sounds. And I'm very interested to see what the consensus is for that one, if people lean towards more to that, because it's definitely another form of Void of Vision that we haven't tapped into yet that I think people will be super, super hyped to hear. But for now, it's just a matter of like seeing what falls which way. And it's been really interesting seeing, I guess, how people reacted to this one. And it's given me a lot of positivity and just encouragement for the next one to even like go even more bolder in the studio next week and like experiment a lot more. Cause it's just, that's all part of it, man. It's just the fun and just the throwing things at a wall until they stick.
I think that kind of, if we return to what we were talking about before with, the benefits of doing like short EP releases, I think that kind of allows you guys, or any band that does that kind of thing, to have that freedom to experiment. Because if you put out an album where you've done all these like 7 different kind of things that you've never done before, a lot of fans are kind of like, what the hell are you doing? Whereas here you can kind of see, you can tinker a little bit and then it's just kind of like, well, that didn't work. We just don't have to do that again if we don't want to.
Absolutely, man. And I think that's the beauty of it, because we're doing these in such short bursts and as individual pieces of work, they kind of work really well in their own world together. And if someone doesn't want to listen to that short EP of that style of songs, then they don't need to, because the old ones are there. So it's a matter of preference at the end of the day. And I mean, we're not always going to write music that pleases everyone, but as long as we're happy and we're sort of like tickling our own senses and brains at the same time and not kind of hunking down into the same old sound, then we're happy as well. So it's a bit of a win-win. And
with this second EP, like a lot of the kind of new sounds you've gone for is kind of like EDM kind of, and techno and kind of stuff, especially on the single Dominatrix. Like that's where it's kind of like more at the forefront than the rest. Has that kind of been a sound you wanted to dive into for a while? And were you kind of, apprehensive of having to, take those steps?
So since Day Dot, I think Void of Vision as a whole has been, we've been always big fans of dance music, of just house and techno and just every element under the sun. And we really view those scenes of music as quite similar to the metal world. Like you have so many different like styles that say like, I don't know, you play like house at a techno club, you're going to get those noses turned up in the same fashion as you would playing pop punk at a metalcore club or something. And it's just like two insane worlds that really haven't, I mean, they have collided in the past, but not as much as they should have, in my opinion. I mean, they're so close in that sense of just history and just like stylistic, like just everything's so close yet so far. And I think that you really need to appreciate both those worlds to kind of like jump in, but to be able to combine those worlds has been so like fun for us. And I think a lot of the confidence did come from working with our friend John from North Lane there was a few things on Hyper Days where we began like tinkering with those sounds together for the first time. And just that man is just a wealth of knowledge. He is just, the way his brain works is just so different to anyone else in the music industries. And I think that's where a lot of that thought process of my own has come from. He's just really just enriched us with a lot of knowledge, and it's just really helped in combining these two elements so well. And I think we just really want to keep making, I guess, metalcore music that EDM fans can enjoy and EDM music that metalcore fans can enjoy. Like I just want to combine these worlds into such a delicious combination. And it's super exciting being a lot more confident with that now, because it's just opened up whole new worlds to us and bright future to come with all that.
So, well, I mean, with the way that this EP's gone down, it definitely seems like you've got a bright future, that kind of direction that you're going in.
That's it. Yeah.
Do you, when you kind of, you've been crafting these songs, was it kind of like you started with the metalcore sound and then you kind of put in those EDM tracks, or did it start from an EDM sound that you were working with and then you put the metalcore in, or was it kind of like a mix of both?
So basically Dominatrix, for example, started off with that vocal loop in the chorus, and it was literally just that word closer in that key. And I think James just went along that key and just figured out a chorus loop. And then basically we worked off that. So we basically started with that chorus and then we built the rest of the song around it. So that one definitely started out with the with that influence. And I think there was another one on there too. I can't remember what it was. Into the Dark started off with what you hear at the start. There's like just this really strange sort of sharp synth buzzsaw sound. And that's what it began with. It was just a constant loop of that riff, but in synth formation. And we kind of built the guitars into that. And then, it kind of keeps repeating in the song. You can't hear it as much in the choruses, but the whole thing just carries throughout the whole track.
Right.
And I think that's also the backbone of like, you hear like a house song, it's got the same sort of sounds just building once on again on each other. And yeah, it's a very creative way of writing. And when you can lock in those sounds all perfectly together, it just sounds terrific. So I think that's like a massive influence that we've taken upon on this EP and stuff to come even. It's just been really handy having that in our arsenal, I guess, a different writing technique.
You've got the latest single that you put out and the final track on the EP, Alter. And you've got Hannah Greenwood from Creeper on there as well. How did it come about bringing her on board for that track?
So our friend and the guy who runs A&R at UNFT, Leander from over your end, he's been working with Creeper for a long time, and in the time that we became close with him and he already had like that contact in his back pocket, we were introduced in the recording process because we were away for a writing weekend, and I think that track at the end of everything, we weren't so sold on, and like we had the chorus down, but just something wasn't getting it across the line, and it almost didn't end up on the EP, full stop. And we had always played with the idea of bringing in Hannah on a track. We just didn't know that this would be the one. And we kind of put the feelers out to Leander. He's like, yeah, let me pitch it to her, see if she's interested. And yeah, she was all on board and she was so easy to work with. And then all the video process came along and she absolutely nailed it. We did another sort of correspondence video where Zach from your end as well filmed all her parts over there and we shot my parts down here, much like the Lonely People video that we had shot over in the UK as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think speaking on Zach really quickly, just having another connection over there that just you can click with so easily just helps so much. And having that creative world sort of reflected on his end from myself is just so awesome to see because he absolutely nailed that. But yeah, likewise to Hannah, having her vision kind of like just reflected so well upon the track and those choruses is just so awesome. I think that band Creeper is just super special, and I know they're massive down on your end, but they haven't really quite hit in Australia. And I've heard rumors of them coming out to tour so many times, and then they took their little hiatus and COVID happened, and now here we are. And I'm hoping that like in the future they can get down here and maybe one day we can clash over there and she gets to do our spot. And yeah, it's just been a really fun like little turnaround, and I think a special moment for the EP for a track that wasn't even supposed to end up on there, sort of comoming out as one of the highlights on there for myself personally. So yeah.
I think as well, like with features, when it's kind of obviously Creeper sound nothing like you guys, versa. So I think it's always good when you have those kind of features that are kind of like a little unexpected, but they just work so well.
That's what I mean, man. Like, I think that was the most rewarding part of, I'm not sure if you've seen it, the Redux project we did on our previous album, Hyper Days. Yeah, like getting to work with sort of artists that we wouldn't necessarily find ourselves working with, and it's just working and gelling so well. It was just such a great experimental period, just learning how to write with people who not necessarily shouldn't be there, but you wouldn't initially think would be, like, for say, Eka Vandal and Decay, and just bringing minds into a room to sort of not make something work, but just allow something to happen. Just can work in your favor so well. And I think that's part of the greatest learning experiences we have in COVID too, just how powerful and how like developmental it is. Developmentally crucial it really is to be able to trust people and bring them into the fold to help you craft your work. Because I know it gets frowned upon a lot in maybe this genre, maybe it used to. But I think it's becoming a lot more of a normality now. But it's just so important now to like have maybe that extra ear or that extra, I guess, input whenever you're in a rut, and when you can come out the other end successfully, then power to you, because it's such an awesome experience getting to share writing experiences with other people. Yeah, because it makes you like touch into creative like spaces that you might not have even thought about before you spoke to these other creatives, right? That's it. Yeah, exactly. Like we've met some very cool people along the way doing this sort of stuff, and I dare say we wouldn't be where we are today if it weren't for them all too. Because it's been a very wild journey to get to where we are, and sort of it's been very awesome meeting all these people along the way. And you touched on the Hyper Days Redux thing that you put out during lockdown, and obviously like you've said, there's quite loads of guests on there for each track. How did you kind of settle on one, which people you wanted on the album, and two, which track they would fit on? I think it was based off just at the time I was going through my Instagram DMs and it was just people I was chatting to over lockdown, like when I was really bored. And I thought, oh, that'd be great fun. I'd love to work with this person. Obviously, I've built like some form of relationship with them. And obviously I went down the list and sort of paired them all up and pitched to them first. And some of them couldn't do it, understandably, whether it be timing restrictions or just it was the middle of a lockdown and some people couldn't even get out to record their parts. And I think we had to compromise on maybe 3 or 4 of them. And that's when I looked a bit more out the box. But it really just came from like, I wanted to theme it in with just like artists that Vov would definitely be with in the future. I think there was a few tours that we had lined up at the time too that never came to fruition, but we had tours with some of the artists on the Redux album. So it was all going to tie in really well. And I think the Holding Absence one kind of worked out in the end. We're still bringing them out this way.
They're coming out this month, aren't they? Like this
that's
month,
it. Yeah. Very stoked. But there was a few more like that where we were going to head out on a tour. Actually, some of them are still happening, so I won't spoil anything there. But if it's a little Easter egg people want to dig for, there'll be a few tours popping up with some artists along that Redux track listing. If you ever wanted to put it out the
it'd be good to perform those tracks as well with the guests live, right?
That's it. I think that's going to be a real treat in the future. We've gotten the pleasure of doing it in Australia with like the Australian artists on there, but to be able to one day click with those internationals it'll be so sick. I can't wait to get Lucas for his part down here. I think it'll be a real treat, and that to see that on stage I think will be so full circle, coming from a project that kind of bloomed in a pandemic world into a world where we can bring a band from overseas into our country and perform with them. It's been a long time coming, and I think that's seeing that and experiencing that is going to just feel so awesome. Like, and it'll feel like we've come such a long way from where we were 3 years ago, and can't wait.
Yeah, when the world was a totally different place. Like,
right? How insane is it, man?
Yeah.
Like.
I mean, return to the Chronicles series. What I really love about what you're doing with that is there's much more of like a strong focus, and you touched on this before, of the aesthetics and the look, but not just like, you guys as a band, but, the artwork and the videos and stuff like that. How important would you say it is, especially in this era of the band, of, the visual component of everything? Would you say that's just as important as the music itself?
Absolutely, man. I think visual presentation is just paired 2 and 2 with your audio presentation. I think, I don't know, you just look throughout history and the two are just combined just so successfully together. It really works. Like, I think I really just took back and look at, say, 90s culture and all the heavy acts coming out back then and how rich the imagery was accompanying the music. Like, look how powerful, and just say the Rammstein imagery from like when they were starting out, and how powerful and forefront all that was. And even like, as much as like you'd hate to say it nowadays, but Marilyn Manson, like all the imagery accompanied like the shock rock vibe, I guess. And I think it's not necessarily missing in the music industry these days, because you see artists like Lil Nas X in the pop realm doing just insane things with all of it. But in the metal scene and the heavier scene, I mean, you still have like your Ghost kind of bands, and Motionless in White still pulling it off terrifically. But I think there's a real lack of just like large presentation behind the music, and at least our generation of music. And I kind of want to help bring that back to the forefront. I think bands like us and Thornhill, like me and Jacob, were just working with ideas for so long over lockdown and just putting them back and forth at each other. And I think we're so excited to help sort of introduce that side of things back into music again, into our realm. And once you pair it up successfully, it just works like a charm, man. Like, as I was saying, like, you just need to capture people's attention from the get-go now, because the attention spans really aren't there for that long. And you kind of just need to grab them in from that first sight. Otherwise you kind of just pushed aside with the rest in their minds, unfortunately. But it's as much as it is like rewarding to pair the visuals and the audio together, I think as well, for my self-discovery and just like, I don't know, just like finding myself as a person itself has just been so important for me to kind of experiment with this stuff too. Because I couldn't say that I would have been doing this like a few years ago. I wouldn't have had the cojones to do it. I would just be kind of like pretty timid about it, to be honest. But incorporating that kind of persona that we incorporate on stage with all that adrenaline rushing through it into creating the art itself, like not necessarily just tracking the vocals, but also putting in the creative work is just, utilizing that adrenaline and sort of excitement to push that stuff as much forward as you would the audio too. It's just been, it's been awesome. Yeah.
And with this, the latest EP and also in your video for Into the Dark and Ultra as well, you've got the black feathers on the EP artwork and on the logo, and then you've got all these black feathers flying at you and Into the Dark, and then you're kind of like surrounded by like a circle of black feathers, which obviously brings like kind of a tie-in with Black Swan.
Yes, of course.
And I imagine on Into the Dark you've got the feathers near your eyes. That just looks like it was pretty uncomfortable, like itching your face or something.
It was initially. I think I forgot about it, but I was hoping for a bit more like eye room when we did that makeup, but then I realized I was going to be very compromised because the feathers kind of frizzled up as the video went on, and it was just closing up my vision slowly. But that's the thing. I think, and you nailed it there. Like I'm a massive Black Swan fan, massive Darren Aronofsky fan. He's an absolute genius in incorporating that movie into what it was. And I think tying in influences from that is another massive thing for me too. Like I've been loving my pop culture of late and sort of bringing in all sorts of influences from not only, I guess, past like music history, but also pop culture as well. Like there's a bit of like, I guess like Fight Club and Dominatrix there. There's a bit of like everything going into like a lot of the videos that I've been sort of helping utilize. And it's definitely worked to a lot of strengths. I think using all of your influences, no matter how broad, is so important because there's always a place for them in your mind and they're always there for a reason. If they're sticking on your brain, like I'm just convinced that it's got to be a part of you. So, yeah.
Well, you guys have been together since like 2013. So next year we're looking at, the 10th anniversary of Void of Vision.
Absolutely.
Which is crazy, right?
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. Like funnily enough, we locked in a tour last week. I can't really say who it is, but the whole gimmick of their tour is a 10-year anniversary, sort of like it's their 10-year celebration as a band. And
right.
And it's just so crazy because it didn't kick in for me until then too. And I was like, so it's going to be celebrate. And it's so eerily similar to like when we started as a band too. Obviously this band is miles ahead of us and whatever, and they're doing amazing things, but like it's still so awesome that we get a little way to celebrate our 10 years as well. But it's been a lot of fun, honestly. And like I know like it's taken a bit of time obviously for us to get to a point in time where we've been sort of happy with how we're presenting and creating everything, but I think if we didn't have those earlier years we wouldn't be where we are today. And it's not at all something that I'm like not stoked on or anything. If anything, it's making me happier because I love learning, I love experiencing everything as it comes. And I think we've had a nice, very slow, like gradual build in our times. There's been no peaks or anything. So it's been nice being able to keep up at a steady rate and not get like launched into a world that we're not so familiar with all of a sudden. And then we lose everything that we've worked so hard for. But I mean, at the end of the day, like we're ready for that if it does happen. And I think either way would be equally as fine to be just gradually climbing as we are now.
I think there's so few bands that you can really think of that kind of like hit out of the gate, and in some ways like most bands I would imagine wouldn't really want that. Like why would you want to peak from the beginning? You want to kind of grow and evolve. And Void of Vision, for example, like this was Void of Vision in 2013, but now look at us, look how different we are, as opposed to here's X band. Like whatever you listened to 10 years ago sounds exactly the same as it is now.
That's it. It's pretty crazy, hey? And like, that whole idea of just peaking on your first record is just such a daunting experience. Obviously, like the band might not have intended it for it to happen. They might have just like smashed it out of the park and then thought, oh shit. It absolutely happens. Like there's a lot of bands out there who have just done like that. But it's I think, for example, like there's clever ways to work about it. Thornhill, for example, like they smashed it out of the park on their first record and they just exploded into this new world that they hadn't been to ever. And all of a sudden, like they're expected to put up a follow-up just as good. And I guess what they did is they visited just a whole new area of musicality. And not only have they just hit it out of the park, but they've already mastered their craft in that world too. And I tell you, man, hearing that album, it's like some stuff beyond their years that's been put into there. So yeah, it's crazy world that musicians so young have been able to not only knock it out of the park with their first album, but also a second album in a completely different genre, just absolutely destroy it as well. So yeah, I think there's ways to go about it, but yeah, man, it's such a crazy concept that you can sort of like peak once album and then you're just done, like one hit wonder vibe. It's scary, to be honest.
It is scary. So when you look back at your 10 years as a band, well, nearly 10 years as a band, what kind of sticks out to you most, and what do you think the 2013 you would say about where you are today?
Oh, geez.
What deep questions.
Out to us? Yeah, loaded, very loaded. I think what sticks out to me most is, man, I was going to say like the Hyper Days album release, but I think it's going to be leaning in towards now just the conception of the Chronicles. Like, it was just that huge of a shift for our band that, I don't know, it was just so weird. Like, something just snapped in COVID, like in our brains, and it just launched us into this motivated world that we haven't ever had, and like nothing was sacred. Like, we were just going into anything and throwing everything out there, and I don't know where the motivation came from. There was no real like major shift like in, I guess, surroundings or anything, and yeah, it just turned into such a beautiful thing. And the fact that we're still going with it now, it's sort of a very recurring like cultural shift for us. Like, it hasn't stopped. I think that's been the most enriching thing so far. Like, yeah, I dare say this has been an easy highlight throughout our time as the band without any shadow of doubt. But as for what my 2013s would say to myself these days, I think, man, he would probably stop me like a couple of years ago and start saying, hey, start smelling the roses, like just make sure you're like appreciating every moment here, like just it's gonna just keep going, so just make sure you're just taking all this for granted. Now that I can live with that in my current era self, I'm feeling a lot better as a musician. But yeah, as we were rushing through everything and trying to keep up with everyone maybe 5 years ago, it was definitely a bit of a pain. And I was definitely a pain to deal with. So it's become a lot easier for myself and the people around me, I think, in those years. So I think 2013 me probably has visited myself in my dream somewhere during COVID and definitely given me a bit of a kick up the arse.
Away from Void of Vision, also like during the lockdown period, you started a new project called Cherry, and you put out the EP Safe in Your Stare. Is that right? That's
the one. Yeah.
How did that project come to be? Because obviously, again, you experimented with Void of Vision, but this is like a totally different direction musically as well.
So that one came from, I can't remember I think we started, myself and Matt Van Duppen from Thornhill. We live real close to each other down this way, and we began starting writing, like, it was kind of like turnstile worship. We were just really bored one day and we started writing a bunch of hardcore tracks, and I was doing these kind of weird turnstile vocals over it. And the initial idea was we were going to create like two different bands. So there was going to be that band and then sort of a balance and composure worship band.
Right. Okay.
And we were going to share the same members, and we were just going to switch up members for each project. So it would just be different lineups, but the same people.
Right.
But then we brought Jacob into the fold and started writing the balance and composure stuff. And then all of a sudden we started watching Coldplay live DVDs and getting obsessed with, as you do, and started getting obsessed with that world of everything. And we're like, holy crap, like this is incredible. And then obviously Jacob's voice is just, you can work with that in any measure of any world and it'll sound amazing. And we basically began working with that style of things. And him and Matt began just writing so frequently that we all of a sudden had an EP worth of songs. And yeah, then the rest of the lineup kind of built itself just with friends in other bands. And yeah, we realized how strong all the pop stuff was over the hardcore stuff. And we're like, oh, well, let's just move on with all of this. And yeah, we ended up having a lot of fun. And that was another big treat over lockdown. I think if it weren't for Cherry, there wouldn't be a lot of, I guess, elements of Void of Vision that weren't as pushed to the forefront. Like, it definitely helped me realize just it's such a an experimental world out there, and like to be able to put that into every aspect of your life is just so important. And I think like I've learned a lot of lessons from those dudes, and just being in a band with them, that it's been just so beneficial for all of us. And I think you'll be able to tell on all bands in that project's like next release how diverse the music and the range is of everything going into it. And yeah, I think there's still so much to come from Cherry. Like it's definitely not just a one-hit wonder kind of vibe like we were talking about. We're still writing. We've got some stuff in the pipeline at the moment.
That's cool.
I think we're just very busy at the moment in Vov and Thornhill. So it's been put on hold for a tiny bit until our like records are completed and put out. And then we'll be able to play some more shows again, I think.
Yeah. It sounds like you've barely got time to breathe. You've got this Void of Vision stuff going on and Cherry.
It sometimes feels like it. I'm not going to lie. No, I've definitely allocated a lot of time for myself. I definitely don't want to burn myself out in that aspect. So yeah, I definitely try to keep it chill as much as I can in the off time. Yeah.
At least it's like different stuff. It's not like you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. You know, you're kind of like flexing your creative muscles, right?
That's it, man. Yeah. Like I think that was also such a treat, because after writing so much Void of Vision over lockdown, it was nice to have an escape in the form of Cherry, where I got to sit down and I guess learn some guitar parts and learn some piano again. I hadn't played piano since I was probably like 12 years old in
Long
like
time.
high school or whatever. Yeah, and to jump back on a stage and start playing again was such a mental treat. Like it was just so stimulating, and like after being the guy just running around stage going ham on a microphone all these years, to sit down and to play piano for a set, oh mate, it was a treat, I can tell you that.
I'm returning back to Void of Vision. You know, we mentioned earlier you've got this tour coming up later this month, bringing over Hold an Absence.
Yes.
What else is in the pipeline so far that you can talk about that's happening for Void of Vision in 2022?
So shortly after the US run, we'll be over your side of the pond, over to the UK and Europe. I can't say who it's with yet. I know it gets announced after Download Festival, but yeah, that'll be there. And then we'll be back to Australia for a few more dates to cap the year off. Otherwise, yeah, we're already locking in those tours into 2023 now, like I said, with that 10-year anniversary. So there's a lot in the pipeline, and I think it wouldn't be there if it weren't for this EP that we just recently released. I mean, it's definitely been put out into the world, like to our friends, and I guess members of, I guess our manager sends it around a lot and sort of like does all that business. And it's nice to know that it's pricked a few years up and sort of granted us a lot of these opportunities, because it's just so surreal to have a full year of touring in front of us again after so long of having none. So I'm so stoked, and it's been so annoying because we've had so many little teasers this year. I think we started off the year, it was supposed to be a full tour, but it was cut in half, and I think it ended up with 2 shows in Melbourne and Brisbane, and they were just half capacity shows, and no mosh, no dancing allowed. So there was all these
like a social distance show, was it?
Yeah, so there was like these. It looked like a cattle pen. Like there was just gates within the crowd that people were like leaning on. Just imagine one barricade times 10. Yeah, and it was just so bizarre. And yeah, I'm very much so looking forward to the next hometown show where we don't have to play in front of that, because that was a bit of a buzzkill. Yeah, but we've just been teased with like a couple of like weekend festival shows here and there, but it's to do a full tour again. Off our own back is going to be very rewarding, and can't wait to finally be back out there and doing this all again, especially this time with Holding Absence too, because it's been a band that's been my constant playlist over the whole of COVID. So yeah, we're very grateful that we can bring them over here and show them how Australia does it for the first time. Yeah. Well, get some cardio in, because if you're running around the stage all the time, you got to get that's what I mean. Yeah, that's exactly it, man. Yeah. Well, before I let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening, any final words, anything else you want to plug? I guess, just keep bumping on Chronicles 2, and before you know it, there'll be another one out there for you. So, very, very excited to share the next step and the next part of the series with everyone. But, until then, we'll see you at a show somewhere in the world, and, have fun. Keep listening. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please consider supporting the podcast in any way that you can. We have a Patreon where you can get access to each episode a week early, along with some other perks, a merch store, a Discord community,
or you can leave a review wherever you're listening to this. You can also follow me on social media or subscribe to the newsletter, where I'll send out each episode to you via email, along with regular playlists. All of this can be found at itsnotaphase.co.uk. That's itsnotaphase.co.uk. Thanks again for listening, and remember, it's not a phase, it's a lifestyle.